A revolution, a student led agitation, a fight for the future of Bangladeshi democracy. This is how the ouster of Sheikh Hasina was described. In the weeks and months that have passed since, what has become clear instead is that Hindus and religious minorities in Bangladesh have been attacked, looted, and made to feel like second class citizens. All of it while Bangladesh is still a self proclaimed secular constitutional republic. Now, there are ideas being floated by the country's new Attorney General, no less, to remove the word secular from Bangladesh's constitution, effectively making Bangladesh an Islamic nation on the lines of Pakistan. Just look at the volume of attacks Hindus have faced in Bangladesh since Hasina's ouster. Islamist mobs have run a riot. In just 15 days of the revolution, there were over 2,000 attacks on Hindus. Homes, businesses, and temples were destroyed. 5 Hindus were killed, and more than 500 Hindu police officers and government officials were forced to resign under pressure from Islamist groups. Since then, an environment of fear and intimidation has clouded Hindus in Bangladesh. Essentially, the Indian subcontinent is changing right before our eyes. But what should India do? After all, Hindus and other Indic minorities in the subcontinent have no other place to go. For starters, this may be a good time to look back at India's Citizenship Amendment Act and how it can come in handy to rescue Hindus, Sikhs, and other minorities from Islamist violence across the subcontinent. But even a noble and humanitarian law like CAA can be dragged through the mud. India saw it firsthand in 2019 and 2020. Remember the protests that swept India in those 2 years? From Shaheen Bagh to JNU to even violent riots in northeast Delhi during then US President Donald Trump's visit. The anti-CAA movement was everywhere. But what fueled these agitations? Misinformation. The narrative spun by vested interest groups was that CAA combined with the NRC would strip Indian Muslims of their citizenship. Fear and outrage were stoked with claims of deportation camps and disenfranchisement. None of it was true, but the damage was done. 5 years later, let's ask a simple question. Have any Indian Muslims been disenfranchised? The answer is a resounding no. Not a single Indian Muslim has lost their citizenship because of CAA. Instead, what has emerged over these years is a stark and painful reality. The persecution of minorities in our neighborhood has only intensified. And yet, the biggest bone of contention for those opposing CAA was that it excluded Muslims. So, let's take this head on. Why does the CAA exclude Muslims? The answer lies in the nature of these 3 nations. Pakistan and Afghanistan are Islamic states, and even Bangladesh, despite being officially secular, has seen relentless violence against non-Muslim minorities. The law focuses on giving refuge to those who face systemic persecution in these countries. Now imagine what would happen if Muslims were included. The doors would be wide open for entire populations from these countries to claim persecution and demand Indian citizenship. Now that's simply unfeasible. But logic and common sense, it seems, were the first casualty in the anti-CAA agitation. We've talked about the situation in Bangladesh, but CAA applies not just to Bangladesh. It's also meant to help minorities in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So, what's the situation there like? In Pakistan, the story is just as heartbreaking. Blasphemy accusations continue to be used as a weapon against non-Muslims. For instance, in Sindh province, Hindus were threatened after a fabricated blasphemy case sparked mob violence in October this year. And the situation in Afghanistan is just as dire. Decades of persecution have left only a handful of Hindus and Sikhs in the country, as most have fled to survive or simply converted. Under the Taliban, whatever is left of religious minorities in the country has to simply make peace with being treated as second-class citizens. It's a sobering reminder of the hostile environments that minorities endure in these nations. So, where does this leave us? First, it exposes the lies spread about CAA. The fears of disenfranchisement and deportation camps were nothing but baseless propaganda. Second, it underscores why the CAA is not just relevant but urgent. This law isn't about targeting any community in India. It's about protecting Indic communities who find themselves on the wrong side of the fence as a result of partition. As the preeminent democracy in the subcontinent, India has a duty to ensure protection for those who have nowhere else to go. India needs to give hope to people whose lives are being torn apart by systemic persecution. However, there's one issue that needs attention: the cutoff date of 2014. Under the current CAA provisions, only those who arrived in India before this date are eligible for citizenship. But persecution hasn't stopped. In fact, it has only worsened. So, isn't it time to reconsider this cutoff to ensure we can help those who are still suffering in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan? After all, the plight of minorities in our neighborhood is a humanitarian crisis that demands action.